Gavin.
And Louie.
We're here in like a fancier space than usual.
Yes,
we're not just
fancy.
drunk in my apartment.
No, we're drunk in public.
Yay! That's my favorite type of drunk.
But this, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. This is another episode of the Mixed Reviews.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here.
And we have a very special guest, and it's our first time having a guest, so I'm super excited. Please welcome to the show, Dan Mecca.
Hello.
Hi.
What an honor.
It is. What an honor!
Let me just pull out Dan Mecca's resume real quick, and just so you know...
Spot on Foley work.
Yeah, well, thank you. We call that props. Dan Mecca, you are a director, writer, producer. On top of that, you're a co-founder of the website The Film Stage, which is a wonderful film website, and if you've not gone there, you should.
Thank you so much. Just so flattering.
And I do want to say, when I told certain gays that I live with that you were going to be our first guest, he was like, "You're having Dan Mecca on to talk about Jane Fonda, a straight guy to talk about Jane Fonda."
Drag!
But you have, once again, all those credentials I listed. On top of that, the most important credential of all, you actually fucking listen to the show.
I do.
And
I
everybody else who's asked me to be a guest, they're like, "Can I be a guest?" I was like, "Have you listened?"
And they say no one else does.
I do listen. And
Exactly.
I'm so pleased to be with you guys. I look forward to being
Mixing
a
it
part
up.
of the Mixed Reviews world, the Mixed Reviews playlist, and also I now officially love Jane Fonda.
Yes.
I always loved her in a more of a abstract way.
Right. Now you appreciate the
And
work.
now I know that I love her.
Right.
In a deep way.
I do want to give you extra credit as well. You actually suggested Jane Fonda, because I was talking about Louie and I talking about what we should do next, and you're like, "Book club's coming out. Why don't you do Jane Fonda?"
Book club, baby.
Book club.
Book club.
Let's talk about book club only.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good.
So for the
It's
next
just the
hour,
book club
And
pod.
but specifically Jane Fonda and her wig.
yes, and it is a wig, right? 100%.
Gavin, how dare you? Of course it's a wig.
Yeah. It has to be a wig.
We'll get to that in the fast
And
forward.
then if we talk about book club, it'll become a Candice Bergen podcast.
That's coming soon.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, we this week are talking about Jane Fonda.
Right.
Normally, this is when we would do old business about Jim Carrey.
So, Gavin, you don't need to drag me as hard. I forgot to put up a poll for Jim Carrey, but like, we all know.
We all know.
You know?
It's clearly the
Oh yeah, the poll of what, his best movie?
Yeah,
Dan, what's your favorite Jim Carrey movie?
Yeah, I was thinking, because I listened to the Jim Carrey one, and you guys went hard on Jim. Like, Jim Carrey, best movie.
Or your favorite, maybe not
or
best.
Favorite. Favorite, I mean, I ride for all the 94 movies, right? When his star-making year.
Yep.
I am a little less of an Ace Ventura person than other people.
I mean, I think we all just sort of aged out of it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, but it has like endured though. You guys talked about that, like the scene, the Finkel is what is it? A Einhorn is Finkel. I mean, that's like
Iconic. All
weirdly
Right.
offensive now, but it's very iconic.
Yeah,
still.
exactly. I was
It's
going
like
to say it. It's something.
a
Your
weird middle
endurance
ground.
is correct.
It's a very weird middle ground. I love How the Grinch Stole. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which
It's something that we didn't even mention.
Right.
No, his best movie, I think, is The Truman Show. I mean, it doesn't even come close. People love Eternal Sunshine. I like.
it seems like me and Dan really are in the same.
I love The Truman Show.
Do you guys need me to leave? Are you going to kiss? 'Cause-
I mean, we already did.
Yeah, so
good.
I mean, I don't know what you were talking about.
Hi, Kelly. Anyways.
But so that is of the past. Like you said today, we're gonna speak about Jane Fonda,
Jane
American
Fonda.
icon.
Yeah,
Queen Jane.
I would say, especially something. So I was very nice to you. The other reason that it was great to have you on is I was able to give you a full month, which is Louie and I get about 2 weeks to do this, which is a lot to cram in, and you knew way ahead of time, and so
A lot of Jane out there.
yeah, I was gonna say because
There's a
there's
lot of Jane.
so much. And I would say that she is more prolific than her very famous father.
Yeah.
You know?
I suppose that's true, right? Henry made a lot of movies, but I think people forget with Jane Fonda that she made so many movies so young, and
Right.
then we know now that she took a long break while she was married to Ted Turner, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is the '90s, basically.
No, that
they're
absolutely
gone.
coincides.
But yeah, I mean, like the '60s, '70s, '80s, she was knocking them out every year.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely.
It's kind of crazy.
And always looking amazing.
Always.
And like I don't want to be like gross like guys talking about women, but like she is somebody who like really prided herself on the way that she looked, for better or for worse, and we'll get into that during the rewind. But like, yeah, she just to this day, she's 80 fucking years old.
I know, 80 years old, and she's still playing the sex kitten.
Yes, absolutely,
and I believe it.
I got so much respect for that. And not to go back to book club because I'm sure we'll come back. In book club, they say Diane Keaton's like, 51 is when I was born, which implies they're all the same age, which is like
nonsense.
That means that Jane is playing down like 14 years,
right, exactly,
and the only one fully pulling it off.
Yeah, I mean it's so Jane Fonda supposed to be the same age as Mary Steenburgen, and I'm like, sure, Jan.
I love Mary Steenburgen was just on RuPaul's podcast, and she's like, it's great to have a movie out there where all the characters are over 65. Now I will tell you, I was 64 when we shot it. It's just
what a queen!
Way to go, Mary Steenburgen.
All right, Gavin, you have the unenviable task of getting us through the rewind this week.
All right,
hit it.
So Jane Fonda, this is very complicated, and I will tell you guys, I did the work. I listened to her entire book, 27 hours of her autobiography.
I did the work. Okay, America.
America. I did the work. Jane Seymour Fonda.
Strong name.
Was born.
Her middle name's Seymour?
Yeah.
So there's another actress named Jane Seymour.
On top of that, her name was spelled with a Y, and she took it out.
Jane?
Jayne.
Oh, wow.
Like
Mansfield. She was born December 21st, 1937. Wow. As I mentioned before, she's 80 years old. It's really difficult to like summarize her life, but she is born to Henry Fonda, as well as her mother, which I'm losing her name now.
She was born into like a Hollywood dynasty.
Yes, absolutely. Frances Ford Brokaw is the name of her mother.
Okay.
Now, the story of her, I'm gonna try and do this exactly the way Jane Fonda does. She breaks her life into 3 sections: 1 through 20, 20 through 40, 40 through 60, and then beyond, obviously. And then
after that, nothing. She's done nothing. Her early life was kind of fraught. Her father was really emotionally detached from her. He was always working, always doing plays, doing movies, and she just never really felt the connection to him. And it's funny because she says that sort of led to her shutting off the emotional part of herself. She discovered a mantra in herself that she would constantly repeat. She didn't realize it until much older, that whenever anything happened bad, she would just repeat in her head, I can fix it, I can make it better. And so she would put this pressure on herself even from a young age. Her mother, Frances Ford, was very depressed to the point where she had to be hospitalized. And she kind of resented her mother for this. And because of that, her last chance to see her mother came home to visit with a nurse, and she wouldn't come downstairs to see her. In fact, she convinced her younger brother, Peter Fonda, to stay upstairs and play with her, but eventually Peter did go downstairs, and little did she know, her mother would kill herself shortly thereafter. Jesus. Her mother was actually home to find an implement to cut her own throat with. Yikes.
That night, after she discovered her mother was dead, she was told by her father that her mother had had a heart attack and died suddenly. Wow. And he then left to go be in a play that night. Just not grieving, just left home.
Classic Hank.
Exactly. And it wasn't until later in school, around the age of 14, that somebody had passed her a magazine, and in the magazine it said her mother had killed herself. Oh, wow. And that's how she discovered.
A year after my mother died, I was in study hall, and a girlfriend passed me a movie magazine in which it said that my mother had cut her throat. And of course I thought if I had gone downstairs and seen her, and that day that she came to the house, then she wouldn't have killed herself. It was my fault. So, I went through life with a lot of guilt, the way kids do. It's all about me. It's all my fault. Many years later, when I got the records from the institution where my mother killed herself, it was a big packet. I remember when it arrived, and I started to shake. I got in bed. I was so cold, and I started reading it, and it was a lot of reports from doctors and nurses, and then suddenly in the middle, there were about 12, 15 pages typed with little handwritten notes in the margins. And one of the most important things that I learned is that she had been sexually abused. Everything fell into place. I wanted to take her in my arms and tell her how sorry I was, that I understood why it had been the way it was. But also, I was able to forgive myself. It had nothing to do with me.
Because of all of this stuff that happened, and also just like the undue pressure of being part of Dynasty, she also began in her early teens, which she learned from a fellow classmate who she does not name in her book. She became bulimic. And this lasted until her 40s.
Jeez.
Yeah, she was bulimic and anorexic, and you can see it in some of the films when she's, Barbarella specifically, she's very thin. And obviously, like, she's padded, when she's... But like, she is... It's not healthy. Mm-hmm. And but she genuinely believed this was the only way to stardom. One of my favorite stories she tells in the book, and I actually have an audio clip of this, is meeting Greta Garbo, who was one of the few celebrities that actually talked to her. And not just talked to her, like her father would throw these parties, and Garbo was so bored at a party, she invited her to go swim in the lake. And when she went with her, Garbo removed her robe and was completely nude. And it was a life-changing moment for her because she realized women didn't have to be... And even though she was bulimic for a vast majority of her life, it's the first time she saw a woman who was built like a human being, and she realized that they didn't have to be so cinched in. And actually, Greta Garbo asked her if she wanted to be an actress.
And I said, no. She said, well, you're pretty enough. And I think I swallowed about a ton of water. I was so shocked. And I think I had a Cheshire grin on my face for the rest of the day. It was a great experience. And of course, my more mature, smarter part of my brain knew there were a lot of very beloved, wonderful, fabulous women in the world who weren't perfect and who were loved. But it took me a long, long time to realize we are not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be whole.
So she attended private schools where, once again, she, as I mentioned, she learned
Imagine being like, why do you want to be an actor? Like, well, Greta Garbo told me to.
Greta Garbo said... You got it, kid. But
more fair, sure.
But just imagine that with a German accent, and a little more intimidating. Before she started acting, she was a model. She appeared on the cover of Vogue twice, and then she really decided to get into acting. And in the '60s or early '50s, she started going to the Actors Studio where she trained under Lee Strasberg. So she is technically quote unquote a method actor, but she's one of those people who can leave it, which is nice. Mm-hmm. We mentioned method acting last week with Jim Carrey. Method acting is sort of inhabiting your character. She describes this really, the moment where she realized she was good was, Lee Strasberg told her she was good, is when he made her imagine she was drinking a glass of orange juice. And she was so good at performing this sort of mime work that he was like, you have this. You have it.
He was like, go to Paris, work the streets as a mime.
Paint your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do the Robin Williams route. And so she starts acting, and she gets her first job. She almost got her first job, funny enough, in the FBI story. But then the director decided to go a different way. But wouldn't it be funny if Hanoi Jane got her start in the FBI story? Funny. But the first movie she gets is 1960s Tall Story, which is based off a play. She's playing opposite Anthony Perkins, and she's basically playing everything she would come to hate. Mm-hmm. She's playing a girl who's in college just to get married.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think she kind of hated the movie, right?
Right. She hates the movie. Director Joshua Logan suggested that she have a couple ribs removed and have her back teeth removed so she would get that more sucking in look in her face and have her nose fixed.
Cannot believe.
And she did all of
it. But that's the thing. If you watch this movie, you're like, she's so stunning that it's impossible to believe that somebody would look at her and be like, this can be perfected.
Well, that's like the Judy Garland stuff from, Wizard of Oz. She's like a 12-year-old girl, and they're like, hey, so you gotta lose some weight. Judy.
Kate Winslet has said the same thing, through her entire career. She's always been, quote, too big. And it's Kate motherfucking Winslet. Hello?
It's crazy.
Women.
So she did a bunch of movie but it wasn't until 1962's Walk on the Wild Side where she earned a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer, which is an award they don't do anymore, just to tell you how long Jane Fonda's been working. Right. But then she did Sunday in New York in 1963, and she really felt that was her breakout. Like, she's really funny. I go watch this movie. Yeah. And it's surprisingly frank for 1963 about sex.
What would have happened if I hadn't told you and we'd gone through with it? You probably would have insisted I marry you.
I would have felt obligated.
And are you obligated to any of the others? Like that dimwit who's been begging you for a late date? Or any of the others you've been picking up on Fifth Avenue buses?
In their instances, I'm not responsible.
And who made you responsible in my instance?
I would have felt it.
Why? The initiative was certainly mine. I didn't merely suggest, I finally had to demand. You couldn't possibly have that saintly a character.
It's not a question of character. In a situation like this, a girl's not supposed to be a beginner.
A girl has to start sometime.
Not with me. A man reserves the right to make a choice.
Who do you think you're talking to?
That's my position.
You mean if I call you next week and explain there have been others, it'll be all right?
Yes.
Call me next week!
Newsday called her the loveliest and most gifted of all our new young actresses for that film. But at the same year, she won the Harvard Lampoon's Year's Worst Actress for the film The Chapman Report.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. Just to give you the sort of opposite sides of how
She also, in that year, made the movie she called the worst movie she's ever made.
Yes.
In The Cool of the Day.
In the Cool of the Day,
Yeah.
which is bad. It's real bad.
It's very bad.
Yeah. We'll talk.
Spoiler
I was going to say
alert.
we might talk about that more later. And then in terms of her personal life, in 1965 she marries Roger Vadim, who is a French director and pretty much universal scumbag. But she loved him. And
For a time.
she tells this story in this book. Like one of the first things that she attracted her to him was that in English he would pronounce the wrong syllable in words.
To get a lot of things out of a woman, you must pretend to understand everything, and to be very cool. And little by little, you influence, and you get what you want. And I don't think that, not in life, but on the theater.
I don't think you pretend
when you hold too strongly a woman, you mean I'm a real slave?
I don't see why. You said you pretend to be cool and to understand. I think you are cool and you do understand, and that doesn't make you a.
The inference I got in the book was that it seemed like she was a little intellectually intimidated, which she shouldn't have been because she's smart, but it's also the 60s. And so I think she liked having just a little something to hold over him.
That's fine.
But it was kind of a toxic relationship. She moved to France for him, and it wasn't until she moved to France that she took part in her first political, activity, and she really saw for the first time the way America was seen by other countries. Before I get to her pregnancy, which she wasn't sure she wanted, Roger would do things like show up in the middle of the night, stay out really late, show up in the middle of the night with a female sex worker, and bring her to bed. And so she was party to many threesomes that she wasn't sure she wanted to have. She did just sort of for him. And to his consternation, a lot of the time she would befriend these people. And some of them, she said, at least until her 60s, she's friends with to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, he would leave for work, and she would have coffee with them. So, not all threesomes turn out badly.
She's like, ghosting? I would never.
Yeah, exactly.
Not me.
Not me. And I thought that was particularly interesting, and I think it's an interesting aspect that she's so frank about. She's like, I don't really know if I'm into women. I don't know if it's a thing I like. I did it for him, but also, I found the sex very rewarding. So, yeah.
I'm putting that on my profile.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I'm into women.
Right. Okay, well, I do.
But yeah, she gets pregnant by Roger Vadim, and her first thought is kind of like, I don't want this. I don't want anything to do with this. Because, and she talks about this in the book, she had a little sexual identity dysphoria when she was young. She was a very tomboy-esque, and for a while she began to wonder if she perhaps should have been born a boy.
Like a lot of girls, I was pretty feisty. I was a tomboy. I climbed the trees and I wrestled. And then suddenly you were supposed to have boyfriends, and you had to be a certain way. You had to be popular, and you had to be thin, and you had to be what they wanted you to be. That became a very difficult time in my life. Partly I was suffering for the loss of that wonderful, strong, brave girl that I had been. I was mourning the loss of her. And so I slept a lot and didn't know what to do with myself, and I was floundering. My father called me frivolous and lazy. He didn't realize that I was suffering. Starving myself, anorexic, bulimic, etc. and so forth. I'll be perfect. I was on this toxic quest for perfection, and it is toxic.
It's an interesting feeling to hear this prominent actress, this prominent sex symbol, talk about this sort of slight dysphoria. In the end, she's mentioned she's very comfortable being a woman, but it is something that crossed her mind for many, many years because she didn't like being seen in that sort of Barbarella sort of way. It's funny, in the book, she talks about how, she's just happy that she's not seen as Barbarella anymore. She loves the movie. She likes that she can watch the movie, but she's really happy that that's not what people are like.
Right.
When the Hanoi J thing happened, she was like, well, that's fine by me.
It's funny because I always thought she has this masculine energy. I mean, her voice is very masculine. Her features, I mean, obviously she's a gorgeous woman and she's clearly this sex icon. But I think maybe it's because her sex icon status is in part thanks to her ability to kind of inhabit both the masculine and feminine. Then she just kind of lives in all of it. I don't know. I think
no. I think I absolutely think you're right. I do think that's one of the things that I've really responded to in a lot of her films, even in Tall Story.
Yeah.
She's a lot stronger and there's very few films where she really drops that strength. There are a couple.
And you can tell in Tall Story she's fighting against the words to some degree. And Cat Ballou is a great example of what you're talking about, Louie, where it's it's a sexy performance, but she's literally taking on the role of this legendary outlaw, and they work nicely together. You know, that's a movie where you can tell her being a star is the reason the movie is remembered. You know what I mean? If it's another actress of the time, I don't know that you get the same result of
I mean, also the song Cat Ballou.
And so sad. Nat King Cole died right after the movie came out, right before it came out.
Literally just
sad.
Right around the time, which is because
kind of heartbreaking.
It's really interesting because he has a lot of screen presence.
A lot. He's in a lot of that movie.
Yeah. When I saw the credits, I was like, Nat King Cole.
He's fourth build. He's third build. He's
So as I mentioned, she's laid up. She's on bed rest, and that's when she really decides she wants this child. She realizes that this is something that she actually wants out of life. But when she's laid up at home, she starts watching TV. And the big thing about the Vietnam War was it was really the first war televised, and she sees everything that's happening.
I believed that our country was on the side of the angels. That if our flag was flying someplace, it was on the side of the angels. I was a believer. And I hated being an American in France with everybody saying to me, because they knew, they'd been there before us. They had their asses whooped before us. You're not going to do it. Sorry, you're not going to win. And I thought, well, it's sour grapes just because they lost. They think we can't win. I didn't understand. And I remember Vadim saying in 65, right at when the Gulf of Tonkin resolution was passed, which permitted Johnson to bomb North Vietnam, he said, you're crazy. You people in Congress, you're just nuts. There's no way. And I thought, how come a French director? What does he know? Suddenly, 1968 and the Tet Offensive, and I thought, oh my God, why? What is this? What does it mean? What does it mean to be an American when we are being whooped by a small agrarian country of peasants and fishermen? And then the events of May, les événements de Mai. Do you remember? Things were happening all over the world. This coalition of workers and students almost toppled the de Gaulle government, and I was pregnant. And suddenly, my eyes began to turn outwards, and I became the characters from my father's movies. I think I once met Martin Luther King's daughter, Yolanda King, and I asked her, I said, did your father used to take you on his knees and teach you about life and values and how to live life? And she said, no, he never did. And I said, no, my father never did either, but you have your father's sermons, and I have my father's films. Tom Joad, Young Abe Lincoln, Oxbow Incident, Grapes of Wrath, 12 Angry Men, The Wrong Man. Iconic characters who cared about justice. And that entered my DNA. He didn't have to speak to me. And at 68 was where all those seeds that had been buried began to bear fruit, and I began to look at the world and came home.
But her first daughter was born on September 28th, 1968, and she named Vanessa Vadim, and she named her after Vanessa Redgrave, who was her idol. So,
did they ever make a movie together?
Oh, why, yes, they did. They made a film called Julia. So their marriage is a little off and on, as I mentioned before. Roger Vadim, and finally in 1973, she divorces him, and 3 days later, she marries activist Tom Hayden.
3 days?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In a freeform ceremony in Laurel Canyon.
What's a freeform ceremony?
It's the hippy-dippy and whatnot.
Love that.
Tom Hayden is the start of her second act, essentially.
And famously consigliere to the Godfather, the Corleone family.
Yes, we all know. Of course.
Doesn't need to be said.
She marries a Robert Duvall character.
How many times has that poor guy gotten that joke after 72?
Especially since he ran for office. So
right, exactly. Oh, man.
But he really, sort of shapes her activism, makes her really more active. She was living with him sort of in, not a mansion. She tells the story about buying this house above the smog in LA and realizing that that's not what she wants. So literally before she even moves in, she sells it and buys a very small house, just basically on the streets of LA. And they have people constantly in there, and they have a friend who refuses to sleep inside, so he sleeps in front of their door. And she talks about trying to take Vanessa to school and having to step over him for 7 years.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and so I love these stories, but so this is the time where she starts to become a very controversial figure in America, and it all comes to a head when she decides to visit Vietnam because she hears of a plan for the U.S. to bomb aqueducts in Vietnam. Which would be a war crime, essentially, because you're basically starving out people. And she wants to go take pictures of it. And unfortunately, while she's there, she's really tired. She I can't remember if it's a break or a sprain. Once again, this was a lot to take in. But she injures her foot, so she's not thinking clearly. She's barely getting any sleep. And while she's there touring these aqueducts, which she actually gets pictures and sound, because she's attempting to make a movie, she gets her picture taken on an anti-aircraft gun. This becomes a hot point.
That is the picture.
Yeah. This is where Hanoi Jane comes from, the nickname that's given to her by detractors. And this is basically, it looks like she's on the anti-American.
And she's smiling, in the anti-aircraft gun. And so it looks like this American...
it's a bad photo.
It's a bad photo.
I wouldn't have given up the experience that I had in North Vietnam for anything. Yeah, I made a mistake. I sat on an anti-aircraft gun without thinking, and I will die regretting that.
And that's the same time, 1972, is when FTA comes out. And FTA was her and Donald Sutherland and a bunch of other... comedians and actors doing, she calls it political vaudeville.
Yes.
And they do a Pacific Rim tour of, outside the army bases, and they're basically saying, fuck the army, fuck the Navy, fuck the Air Force, and giving voices to these soldiers who do not want to be in this war.
And they get, the army actively tries to get people not to go. They try to send people on drill so they can't go. They even call in a fake bomb threat at one point to one of their shows.
Yeah.
The U.S. Army does this to get people away from her. There's a great Vulture article out right now because Metrograph, which is a theater in New York City, is doing a retrospective currently. And they talk about the photo, and they say, quote, Fonda has apologized for the photo repeatedly and will be doing penance for it perhaps forever. Hanoi Jane is a nickname like a flashbulb memory, one that easily encapsulates a chaotic time. But she has always denied that she has to apologize for any other work she did in Vietnam, reminding us the government was lying to American soldiers, and it was not traitorous protest the war.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Right. And look, she's an intelligent woman, and her comments on it are totally thought out and rational, and to hear her speak about it is very important.
Yeah. And I think she's always said, she was like, I was never anti-soldiers, and like she was more like, I want to give a voice to these young men and women who are putting their lives on the line for like this war that they don't want to be a part of, that the government is lying about. And I think God, what a fucking ally to be like so famous, like truly like the most famous, and so beautiful, and have all this money. And she's like, you know what? I'm gonna like go on tour. This was before the internet. She was not like out there live tweeting in Vietnam. Yeah. Like she was like, I'm getting on a plane with Donald Sutherland, and we're gonna go put some shows on.
And she won. And to your point, she won her first Oscar early in that year for Clute.
And on top of that, very famously, and one of the things she talks about many times is, one of the things that she always worries about is when she was younger, she spoke too much and didn't listen enough. And I would say that that Oscars was really the point in which she really perfected the listening, because she thought to herself, should I say something? Should I say something? And she doesn't.
Yeah, I think she says, she's like, I think everyone was expecting me to use that platform when she wins her Oscar to like do a whole thing. And instead she says,
thank you very much, members of the Academy, and thank all of you who applauded. There's a great deal to say, and I'm not going to say it tonight. I would just like to really thank you very much.
I mean, she's intelligent, like you said. She knows what's going on. She knows what the perception of her is, and I think it's really smart of her to like separate. This is my job as an entertainer, and then in my real life, I need to go and do my thing that I can do to help entertain and help soldiers who have an awful, fucking thing that they're doing and they want to be out of. So I can't imagine, especially in this pre-internet world where it's like any little sound clip, any photo, any little thing is all you're gonna see and get.
Right. I don't want to stay too long in the 70s, but it's such an important part of our time. But I will say, this is really when things start to get crazy. She later was able to obtain her FBI files and through a Freedom of Information Act, and she found out that she was subject to a massive campaign that was attempting to charge her with sedition. This label is given to a person who advises, counsels, urges, or in any manner causes attempts to cause insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty by any member of the military and naval forces of the United States. Because she was so vocal about the Vietnam War, her file was given the codename Gamma Series, and she found out that her bank turned over her financial statements. The CIA opened her mail, which was the first case of this ever happening to an American citizen. Like, these are important things that, like, of really creepy things that the government did to her. 3 years. They spent 3 years targeting her under the watch of J. Edgar Hoover. And finally, the FBI determined that nothing could be brought to her. And in she mentions this in her book, one of the personal notes, one of the people overseeing the investigation was, this investigation is not legal because it seems like you're just targeting a private citizen, somebody that you do not like.
Right. And because she had a voice.
Right. But, I mean, it's so crazy that, like, here's this person who's famous for making these movies, and the government's like, we need to shut her up. Like, I'm shocked she made it out of the 70s, in all honesty.
It's weirdly similar to like a Muhammad Ali, where within the space of 3 to 4 years, she's an icon for one thing, and then is almost has her eyes open to this thing that's happening, and chooses to go this other way, where it's she's a sex icon in this, campy 68 sci-fi movie that her husband makes, and then by 72, she's an Oscar winner with an FBI file. It's wild.
I do want to say real quick, too, just before we move on to... I mentioned that she was making a movie over there when she was filming. The movie, the visual of the movie survived long enough for her to show it to the French press. Somewhere between the trip to Vietnam to France, the audio disappeared. The video, she was able to narrate for the French press once, and then she was able to show it once in New York, and then it disappeared. And so
you're saying this in a way that like somebody stole it or something
stole
like that?
her film of all the footage of the bombed out aqueducts in Vietnam. And to this day, she has no idea where it is.
History.
Yeah,
crimes.
exactly.
Mr. Plum.
Obviously, somebody thought she wouldn't be able to present it without the audio. She was, and so video had to go too.
It's fascinating.
She has a son. His son, Troy O'Donovan Garrity, was born July 7th, 1973 in Los Angeles. And then her and Hayden unofficially adopted an African-American teenager, Mary Luann Williams, also known as Lulu. She was a daughter of the member of the Black Panthers because Fonda had connections everywhere, essentially. And she helped him run his Senate campaign, and they seemed to have a really decent relationship, but slowly you could tell there were some tensions pulling them apart. And she doesn't cite this as a reason, but I can definitely see it being a really shitty thing that happened. So she decides to really start making more political films, and you see a string of her films in the 70s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one more than ever, more than some of the others, is Coming Home. And they see an early cut of that film. They air it. It's about 3 hours. It's an early cut, as I mentioned. All films go through, if you listen to this podcast, I'm sure you know, but all films go through early cuts, rough cuts that are way too long. Tom Hayden comes with her, is silent throughout the entire screening, and as the credits roll, he gets up and pats her on the shoulder and said, "Nice try."
Ooh, for coming home?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Why? Wow.
He didn't feel it went far enough. He didn't feel that it presented the politics, the anti-war politics that he stood for far enough.
Nice try.
Relax, dude.
Relax, Tom.
Yeah. So in 1990,
and she said, "Fuck you! I'm getting my Oscar for it."
And she felt a lot.
Second Oscar.
She felt a lot of tension growing in that relationship. And prior to their divorce, she does something that she never thought she would do. She has breast implants, and it really fucks her up because it's one of those things that she was like, I'm never going to alter myself to fit standards of beauty, and she does it, and it's something that just hammers the nail into the relationship. So in 1990, they divorce. And real quick before we move on into the next section of her life, I know this is going on really long. She has a really long life. She makes a film with her father on Golden Pond in the early 80s.
Yep.
And it is really a moment of catharsis for her because she never felt that he believed in her as an actor, and he definitely did not care for the method. And she talks about one specific moment in the film.
The scene where I have to say to him, I want to be your friend. And I wanted him to have emotion as well. And so I waited for his close-up, and I did something that he always hated. He didn't like anything to happen that hadn't been rehearsed. And I reached out and I touched his arm, and he flinched, and tears came to his eyes, and he went like this. And if you look at the movie, you can see he ducks his head like this, but I saw. I saw. That's all you need.
The movie kind of really parallels their real relationship.
Yeah.
She plays his daughter,
right?
And a lot of the movie is this woman being like, "I hate Dad. Dad doesn't love me. He never has." And she's doing her best to like make her life work. And he's like a crotchety old, son of a gun. And so it's really seeing it is really like you're getting a little glimpse into their reality.
Totally.
And he died soon after, huh?
Yeah. And the other important thing that happens in the 80s before we move into the 90s is she breaks her foot a second time and realizes she can't do ballet. She was a very strict ballet person. That's how she kept herself thin besides bulimia. And she needs to discover another way to keep herself thin.
How does she do, guys?
She discovers aerobics.
Oh my god!
She learns aerobics.
The best thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
5-star reviews for Jane Fonda's.
All of them. All 15 of the workouts.
Yeah. Julie Mecca loves those aerobics.
Oh, shout out to Julie Mecca. She starts this aerobics thing. She learns it from a woman in California, and she realizes that she can start teaching. She starts teaching on film sets. People are like, "You're really great at this." And a friend of hers is like, "You should monetize this." And what's really brilliant, the most brilliant thing, she talks about how like VCRs when they first came out were super expensive, and nobody had any reason to own them. Yeah. Because you wouldn't watch things multiple times because they don't have the culture that we have where we buy a film and we watch it over and over and over again. But if you have something to watch over and over again, like a daily exercise routine,
perhaps.
So smart.
Yeah.
Literally, Jane Fonda is the reason why Americans were like, VCRs!
Yeah. Absolutely.
And they weirdly did that club noise. People don't talk about that enough.
Exactly. Jane Fonda invented aerobics and the club noise.
Yeah. This is why we do this. You guys do
it is the worldwide most sold VHS tapes ever, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to my 12th workout video. I bet you didn't know there were 12 of them. All kinds of classes for different levels of fitness. The class we're doing today is 60 minutes of interval aerobics designed to maximize fat burning and cardiovascular fitness, and it's for all levels. This kind of interval training requires you to increase the level of intensity that you're working at for a short period of time, then slow down a bit, repeating this pattern in intervals throughout the class. Competitive athletes have used intense interval training for years to improve their performance, and it's a great way to burn stored fat.
And initially she starts it to supplement her charities, and she does a lot of charities. She does camps for underprivileged kids, and it was a lot of a mixture of kids. It was kids with illnesses, kids who have disabilities, inner city youths, and it's really, like, she does a really great thing with this money, which is something that people don't talk about, because I think people think that she did it just to garner wealth.
Right.
And really, she was just funneling this money back
and
out.
And to be, like, hot.
Yeah, exactly. Which was, I mean, she was.
She was.
Yeah.
She was.
And so we enter the third section of her life, which is the weirdest section, and the section I wish lasted shorter in the book. But literally, once again, she's divorced in 1990, and Ted Turner calls her like a week later and is like, "Hey, I hear you're divorced," and she describes as this like fast talking,
spot on Ted Turner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spot on Ted Turner.
And he starts to woo her, and she's a little put off because he like owns all this land and he's very rich, and she's very like not this, but he's this one part in the book she tells him, and I was like, he sounds awful. He's telling her like his favorite things, and he's like, as a kid I loved Attila the Hun and I loved Alexander the Great, but now my idols are Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and I was just like, he sounds like a bad guy, Jane. Don't do it.
A fuckboy if I ever heard one.
She rebuffs him at first. She starts dating an Italian. Italian doesn't work out. He calls her back, and he's like, I hear you're not dating that Italian anymore. And so he wears her down, in much the way that Steve Urkel wears down Laura. And he becomes her third husband on December 21st of 1991 in a ranch near Caps, Florida. They get married. The pair, they last for 10 years. She decides to go into retirement from acting. Her last film is in 90, I believe.
Yeah, 1990. She makes a couple of final movies, And
she decides to go into retirement partially because she says she's not feeling it anymore, but also Ted is a little controlling, and he says, like, I couldn't have a wife working that much. I couldn't have a wife away that much. And she forms a really good relationship with his kids and everything, but at the same time, clearly, like, the first time she catches him cheating on her is 2 years into their marriage, and as she describes in the book, she's like, I'm not a violent person, but I hit him with a car phone repeatedly, and all I could think to myself while it was happening was, wouldn't this be funny if somebody did this in a movie? And their relationship, like, it doesn't last. And on May 22nd of 2001, she divorces him, and she says he drops her off at an airport and immediately gets into a car with his mistress and drives away.
Ted.
Yeah.
Fucking Ted.
It feels like a very Ted Turner move. I don't know the man.
Don't know the man, but it feels right.
It feels on brand.
Mm-hmm. After that, she decides she wants to be her own person. And that's really... She talks about how she really molded herself to be, this person that each of her husbands... She conflates this with her bad relationship with her father that shut off her emotions, so she would find people that she could become the thing that they wanted. Roger Vadim, she was the sex pot. Thomas Hayden, she was the ultra activist. And Ted Turner, she was the socialite wife. And it really bugged her that she spent so much time in her life being other people. Now, I think that's a little unfair to herself, because I think a lot of the stuff that she did as an activist was really important, and not because of Thomas Hayden. And I think she was headed down that road even without him.
Right.
It just makes sense that she ended up with him. The socialite stuff, I don't know. She had a decade of that. Yeah, exactly.
He's a rich guy.
Exactly.
But also, I can imagine, like, she's like, oh, well, like, this is what Mom and Dad's life was like, and so it's not, like, completely off the mark. I mean, maybe if she doesn't like it or she doesn't want to do it, cool. But it doesn't feel, like, completely out of the realm that a Fonda would want to be a socialite in, like, society.
But real quick, she rediscovers religion, which is a weird sort of thing. She talks about, like, she's a non-denominational Christian. She decides to move back into Christianity in the early 2000s, and now she practices very specific type of yoga. Zazen meditation and yoga is really where...
we all know.
Zazen. Yeah, Zazen. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in 2005, she decides to come out of retirement from acting. Her old manager, not old manager, but her prior manager, is a producer on a film called Monster-in-Law.
I mean, the classic.
I mean, I'm waiting for the Jennifer Lopez episode.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll talk about Monster-in-Law more then.
And then...
and also, enough.
Yeah, enough. And she's been working steadily since, and you've seen her in a lot of things, and she's currently on a Netflix show, Grace and Frankie. She has a movie out right now, and there's a documentary coming out on HBO called...
Jane Fonda in 5X.
Jane Fonda in 5X, which will be out soon, and we'll talk more about that in the fast forward. I do want to mention, as you mentioned, she's... twice Academy Award winner for Clute for Best Actress and for Coming Home for Best Actress. In 1962, she was awarded the honorary title of Miss Army Recruiting by the Pentagon. Little did they know!
Little did they fucking know.
In 1981, she was awarded the Women in Film Crystal Award. And yeah, she's literally just so awarded. I do want to mention, once again, I know this is going long, but charitable works. She's basically spent the rest of her life focused on charitable works, focused on youth, education, adolescent reproductive health, which is very important, environment, human services, and the arts. Fonda has established the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential in the mid-1990s, and the Fonda Family Foundation in the late 90s, which was actually the first $1 million for that, was given to her by Ted Turner at her 60th birthday. So, in the mid-2000s, Fonda founded the Jane Fonda Foundation in 2004 with $1 million of her own money as a charitable corporation, with herself as president, chair, directory, and secretary, and she contributes 10 hours each week on its behalf. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're a working actress, to take a full day
off,
I mean, that's not nothing.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's really impressive. She also does a lot of outreach for at-risk youth, especially in terms of sexuality and sexual identity. It's something she's very passionate about.
She's a true living legend, and an ally for so many. I mean, just looking at her work, like after that's those string of movies where she's like, I'm going to make movies that are saying something important and that I believe in.
Something to me.
Yeah, and I'm not going to Barbarella was fun and all that, but she was like, I'm fucking over men just wanting to I fuck me.
Yeah.
Well, and she speaks to, I think she speaks to the idea of growing into yourself, you were talking about. I mean, the thing that I came away from watching her movies more than anything was you can watch how she changed in her movies, in her performances, in her life, in her life's work. And, for every, quote-unquote mistake that the public believes she made or what have you, she turns another corner and goes another direction and is doing things. And nothing stops her, right?
Yeah.
And even with the Ted Turner thing as a funny, aside in her life, I'm sure Jane talked about that with us, or if it's in this documentary coming out later this year, it would make total sense, right? She speaks to a full life. I mean, it's interesting. She's definitely a fascinating subject.
As I mentioned before, she's 80 and she's still going strong.
She's still going strong.
As I read this, I'm about to turn 78. And though I know you'll find this hard to believe, this is the happiest I have ever been. It was all worth it, the good and the bad. So don't give up. I'm proud of you, because you will never settle for less than you think you can attain. Love, Jane.
Should we get into our 5-star reviews? 1-star reviews?
I think we should go with, just because I want to get the Band-Aid off because I love her so much, let's go with 1-star reviews.
1-star reviews. I'm just gonna jump in and say, how many of us are voting for Georgia Rule?
So, I'm not.
Okay. Am I the only one in Georgia Rules?
No. I think it's a really bad performance.
Okay.
Nonetheless.
Yes.
And a bad movie.
I don't love it. I'll talk about it.
Okay, so Georgia Rule is 2007, and it's after Monster-in-Law, so it's and her comeback tour.
It is, because she...
which was bandied about a bit.
Yeah.
I do remember my mom watching the Today Show and being like, Jane's back.
Yeah. I didn't touch on this, but she initially was only going to do those 2 movies because they could shoot in and around her schedule, because she was living in Georgia at the time, and Georgia Rule was actually shot in Georgia, and then she was like, cool, I'm done, and then she was like, I don't want this to be the last.
Right. So Georgia Rule, perhaps mostly famous for being Lindsay Lohan's true combustion of her life and career. Also starring Felicity Huffman, who deserves better.
Yes.
Deserves better, Felicity.
I know, it made me sad watching Georgia Rule, where you were like, she got nominated for Transamerica.
Yep, right. Yep.
And then it's like, where'd you go? I mean, she was in that show that people liked.
Desperate Housewives, that show people liked?
No, the John Ridley show. That would just
American Crime or something.
Yeah.
People like that.
People like that.
So this movie, 2007, directed by Gary Marshall, and
I keep forgetting that.
I just remember like the stories coming out on like E! And like Entertainment Tonight, just being like, they can't control Lindsay on set, and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know what this movie was about. I finally saw it.
I didn't know what it was about either.
I thought
I was shocked.
Well, in fairness, the I don't think the marketing
was all like
hides what the movie's about.
Yeah, they thought like it says it's a comedy drama. It is not.
Yeah,
like seeing Jane Fonda say like "fuck you" to Lindsay Lohan does not a comedy make. Essentially, this movie's about Lindsay Lohan's character, who is like a fuck up. And Felicity Huffman plays her mother, and she's like, I can't deal with her. And so she drops her off at her mom's home in Idaho, and that's Jane's house, and she believes in God and hard work. And so
Jane is Georgia.
Yeah. Yes, Jane is Georgia. And she's got rules.
It's a big theme.
Like Dua Lipa.
Yes.
And so she's like, under my house, you'll be in by... And the whole thing...
I like that she's become Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, it is. She, like, was taking on Golden Pond.
Yeah, and she's like, I got this. Katie Heps.
I'm not going to get too deep into, like, what the fuck this movie's about, but essentially it's, like, Lindsay Lohan trying to fuck Dylan McDermott, but he's, like, mourning his, like...
I'll give the one thing I'll give the movie. Dylan McDermott's the only person giving a performance.
Guys, I'm sorry, Dermot Mulroney.
Dermot Mulroney, you're right!
You guys are making the mistake.
Shit, you're right.
I love that you're making the classic mistake.
Are they not the same?
It's the same person. Dermot Mulroney, you're right. It's Dermot Mulroney.
It could be Dylan McDermott.
There's a scene where he has a confrontation with her, and she's like... she's mad at him, and she's just gone fishing, and she hits him, and he just, like, the line delivery of, like, don't hit me with fish.
Right.
Is the best line delivery in that entire movie.
Essentially, she, like, tells him that she's been sexually assaulted by her stepfather.
Yes.
But then she's like, but was I?
That's the whole movie.
And the whole movie is like,
that is
but
literally
did I?
the whole movie.
And poor Felicity Huffman, who's married to this man, just
played by Carrie Elwes.
Played poorly by Carrie Elwes, whom I love, but like,
and Felicity is like going for broke. Like she's an alcoholic, and she's like, I don't know what's happening, and literally Lindsay Lohan's character is just, and she's just like. No, I lied, Mom, because I'm crazy. Like I'm
because I wanted you to actually believe me more. Everybody else believed me.
Right. And the movie just like vacillates between going back and forth and whether or not Lindsay Lohan actually got fucked when she was 12 years old by her stepfather. And the movie is a fucking. I was like, who's this movie for?
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, no, exactly. The only thing I find interesting about the movie that I give it a little credit for is it is trying to explore like the muddled nature of abuse, I suppose. Right. Obviously, Gary Marshall's the wrong person to deliver it. I mean, and the tone is very almost offensively light.
It's offensive.
Just real like, can you talk a little more about Jane Fonda though? Because like, there's not a character there.
No, Jane. And then there's not. She's. So I guess she's supposed to be the person that's like going to shape Lindsay's character into like a woman who wants to like get her act together and like what I did with your mother. Jane doesn't do much. She kind of.
And it feels like it almost feels like an editing choice.
Yeah.
I mean, and I wonder
there's
if
something more that was left.
It's. I was going to say for being the title of the film, because she is Georgia. She has very little screen time. And there's scenes like she confronts Carrie Elwes at one point, and you really want to see that Jane Fonda fire, and there's nothing there.
You know I know.
Oh, come on, Georgia.
I don't care what Rachel says. I know. And that must eat at you. Having something that disgusting, criminal, known out here, exposed out in the open. If my daughter wasn't in love with you, I would kill you.
And also, a weird thing about Georgia Rule is it is another case in her long and illustrious career of the wrong title for a movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Her entire career has been about the wrong title. Yeah.
Very, very strange.
Because Clute is a movie not about Clute.
Clute is the
Bree
name
Daniels.
of... Yeah, Clute's the name of Donna Sutherland's PI, John Clute.
Yeah.
It's about Bree Daniels, who's Jane Fonda. Old Gringo is a weird movie that she produced that... Old Gringo is Gregory Peck's character, but he's in it and has a big role, but it's way more about Fonda and Jimmy Smits.
I would 100% even fight for the name Coming Home. Coming Home might be the aura of the movie,
right? But
it's about her staying home. Like what happens to everybody left behind.
Okay, let's move on from Georgia Rule.
Okay.
Gavin?
I want.
Oh, so mine is, we've mentioned it a million times. It has to be Monster Law.
Yeah. I like that you're both picking later career.
But it has to be Monster Law. I we all watched most of her stuff. I watched most of her movies. I rewatched a lot. She made plenty of subpar movies.
Right.
Comes a Horseman's a slog. In the Cool of the Day isn't great.
Yeah.
That might come up. But Monster Law. Especially when we think about Jane Fonda, feels like such a betrayal for Jane Fonda.
Yes.
When I watched her character, when we talk about the late age socialite thing, that's the only performance that feels like whatever that is, where she's literally playing, and the way the movie opens and introduces her. She's this old powerhouse woman getting kicked out for younger. That's the only moment.
That's the only moment I like, and not even until the
she has like a breakdown on air because she can't.
I don't even like the breakdown on air, but the stuff leading up to the breakdown is so fucking good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah. And it speaks to a lot of Hollywood scripts where I'm sure there was a version of that movie before it was called Monster in Law.
Yeah.
That's pretty biting, maybe. Pretty, I don't know, interesting in its own way. Which is maybe why I give Georgia Rule a little bit more credit than Monster in Law. Because I feel like I still see the nugget of that idea. Where Monster Law is insane. I mean, the whole movie is literally Michael Vartan.
Oh, poor guy.
Good old Michael Vartan. And Michael Vartan,
he's handsome
as ever.
I love the moment where Hollywood was like, maybe Michael Vartan.
Yeah.
I feel like that moment of Hollywood being like, maybe Michael Vartan was also the time in which Jennifer Garner was like, maybe Michael Vartan.
Yeah.
It coincided.
100%. But the whole movie is, Jane Fonda's in a tentative place. She's like literally losing her mind. It's played as a joke. She's taking too many pills, which now feels very weirdly misplaced. And the whole movie is she's trying to break up the engagement of her
that's
successful doctor's son with Jennifer Lopez, who is basically
Jennifer Lopez.
They never say this, but it's basically like. She's a Puerto Rican who doesn't have a full-time job. That's basically
literally
what it is.
Jennifer Lopez decides to play like the most passing, whitewashed version of herself. Even her voice is like, "Hi guys," and I'm like,
so
Jennifer.
Weird.
And it's I understand code switching. I get it. Like I live that like light-skinned Latino life, but the way she it's insane. I'm offended by that performance.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the plot of the movie because I think it does explain a little more. But that's the other thing, and she has sense. She absolutely has sense. Said it was a terrible script, but I knew people would see it because of Jennifer Lopez.
Yep.
And people did see it,
right?
Yeah, it made a lot of money.
And I think definitely it helped her like indoctrination back into the world. So fine.
But on top of that, you're right. Yeah. Everything that she went through, she in the book she talks about she would spend full days in bed when she was a teen because she was so depressed. And this movie has scenes like that are played as a joke. Mm-hmm. That her character's mental instability totally. is meant to be laughable, and it's something that, like, as an audience, we can be like, "Oh, she's crazy!"
Isn't it so crazy?
And like that performance is like frustrating and offensive. Like, yeah. And it gets to a point where they're physically hitting each other, and you're supposed to laugh.
Take off that white dress right now, or I'll take it off for you.
Don't you tell me what to do!
You did not just poke me!
Don't you touch me, you two-bit tramp! Oh!
Oh my God! Viola, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
You don't go and slap somebody and then apologize. Get some backbone.
This is great! crazy.
There's that stuff. There's also the Wanda Sykes character, who is basically playing like the funny black friend.
Yeah, if they had named her Mammy, like it would have been just that much more obvious.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's
there's a million things in it that are very
Adam Scott as the gay best friend that they never, but he's not gay. They never mention it.
They never talk about it.
They can't talk.
He puts on a voice.
And even there's jokes about like,
and he like loves Michael Vartan. It's like he never outwardly says like, oh, I want to have sex with that guy.
Right. Jennifer Lopez is like, you're my buddy, and they I'm like, okay, we got it.
Very strange movie.
So strange.
Really did not have a good experience watching that one.
All left turns when they should have been right turns. But once again, I also think Fonda's performance is particularly bad. Too.
No, I mean, she's bad in the movie. I mean, shut up. What's your?
So my 1-star review is I went much older, and I actually did, and she's mentioned it's her least favorite film she ever made.
Yeah.
In the Cool of the Day. It's from 1963, very early on in her career, before she even hit her. She plays basically the Satine character from Moulin Rouge. She's a sickly young girl who just also happens to be Jane Fonda.
Doesn't ever look sick at all.
No,
until the last 2 minutes of the movie.
I think she faints a little at some point in that. She meets Peter Finch, who is
a million years older than her.
Yeah, a million years older. Very rich because he can just pal around Greece for like an entire film. And the problem is he's already married to Angela Lansbury. And on top of that, he was in a car accident with her that left her scarred, which, by the way, the scar seems to move throughout the film.
Yeah, and also is not noticeable.
It's not noticeable. It's like a little line here, or sometimes here. Sometimes here.
And then their son died, though, right?
Their son died in the
tragedy thing.
And because of that, Angela Lansbury is a heinous bitch.
Right.
What the movie does to Angela Lansbury is
for
literally
no reason.
Unforgivable. It's a sin that someone will pay for.
Yeah,
right.
And speaking of Fonda's performance, so he falls in love with her, and I'm gonna this is you can watch the other two films. I'm gonna save you some time. I'll spoil the shit out of it for you. So she ruins his marriage, and Angela Lansbury leaves. And by the way, once Angela Lansbury leaves the movie, it's not worth watching anymore. She's clearly the star, which is crazy because the movie has Jane Fonda in it.
And Jane Fonda's married too.
Yes.
But
That's right. I always forget
that. But it's a marriage of convenience.
Yeah, and it's not important. It's not important.
The guy clearly doesn't care. It's very strange.
So they continue to travel around Greece, and then her mother finds her and is like, "You need to come home." And then she gets sick and dies, and that's it. Like literally, that's it. She's wrapped in plastic, and they have to remove the plastic. And she has this awful death scene where she's just like, I would rather have 10 minutes than 10 years.
Okay,
and
it's a model in horror show.
I didn't want you to go through this ever. I hate having you see me like this. No, Marie.
Don't blame yourself for anything.
I wanted life. I found it. Marie, do what we would have done together. Will you? Will you, Marie?
You have no idea what connects these characters together. You have no idea what she died of. You have no idea why any of this is happening. And it's just this miserable experience the entire way through. The only saving grace is it's an hour and a half.
Thank God. It is a short movie.
But yeah, and I will say this. That's why I feel bad that you guys picked modern performance, but they're deserved. But, I felt like, in terms of acting, she really learned from In the Cool of the Day. Because in The Cool of the Day, she just had to show up and be pretty. Mm-hmm. And she just basically, until the rest of her career, never played that role again. Even in Barbarella, she's given more to do.
Well, and she has an interesting quote when she was reading the script for They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Yeah.
Talking with Sidney Pollack, that she recalls she didn't love the script, but when she met with Sidney Pollack, he asked her for her thoughts, and that was the first time in her career a male director, because they're all men,
right,
up until that point, and I think most of her career, that was the first time a male director was like, tell me what you think, collaborate with me on how to make this better, how to make your character better, and that is ultimately why she took that movie, which is of course a great movie.
And so it's just men being men, guys being guys, and and her performance suffered for it. But I'm glad she was able to move past that, and I'm glad she had the foresight to kind of move past that. But like I said, I genuinely believe she never played that type of role ever again.
Yeah.
So let's move into our 5-star reviews.
5-star reviews, thank God. I have so many things that I love.
Yes,
but
that's the one advantage of doing this, is that she does actually have so many good movies. She could have actually won the Academy Award many more times.
Totally. Like, I was for a long time gonna choose The China Syndrome because I'm a sucker for like journalism movies.
Yeah.
And I really like it a lot. But then I was like, I'm crazy because it absolutely is 9 to 5.
Really?
I'm a gay man.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Are you?
Surprise.
I love 9 to 5. So
9 to 5 is a 1980s movie directed by Colin Higgins, and she produced it.
Yeah.
And she was inspired by a friend who started this organization in Boston called 9 to 5, and it's just like this high radical satire of, you know, the workplace and women having to fucking deal with the men.
Yeah. And they did a lot of interviews with actual secretaries and whatnot, and like that's essentially how the script was molded.
Yeah, and she said that they at first they tried doing it as a drama, and then she was like, "No, I think it needs to be a comedy," and it really they shaped it really well into this thing. So it doesn't even feel preachy. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're gonna get you, like women's liberation. Like, it's really, really funny. Dolly Parton makes her theatrical debut. Also pens an iconic song.
The best.
I have a very funny Dolly Parton. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you,
please.
but like Jane Fonda brought her son to the set, and it was very clear her 9-year-old son was like infatuated with Dolly Parton. And finally, Dolly Parton went over to meet him, and at one point she goes, "Do you know, Mama, feet are so small?" And he didn't answer. He just shyly, and she said, "Because things don't grow big in the shade."
Dolly Parton. What a queen. What a queen.
What a queen.
The queen of all queens.
The queen, yeah, absolutely.
And then also starring Lily Tomlin, who another American legend icon star.
Yeah.
And
an amazing trio.
I mean, an amazing trio. And Jane specifically in this movie is playing against type, really.
Yeah.
She's not the, like...
This is one of the times I would say,
yeah,
like, she, as I mentioned, she exudes this sort of inner strength.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 9 to 5 until she comes into that character.
Right.
She does a really good job at reserving it and pulling it back.
And I want to say, like, give a shout out to whoever did, like, the styling and, like, because she's dressed as a very conservative kind of, like, her husband has left her for his secretary, and she's like, I guess I have to work now, and I don't know how to, like, the iconic scene of her with, like, the coffee machine falling over herself and being intimidated.
They did many screenings, and often they would do screenings for women who worked in offices, and during that scene, that was the most reaction they would get from the offices of, like, women shouting out, like, just push the orange button!
That's so good.
The movie is just iconic, and it's just about these 3 women who are plot to, make their office a better place to work and come after Mr. Hart, who's an asshole.
It's really ahead of the time, and I hadn't seen it in a long time, but the part at the very end when, like, all of their changes get implemented, except for the pay raise to be equal with men. Mm-hmm. I was like, Jesus Christ.
That's what I'm saying. This movie, over 35 years later, this movie is still radical.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And again, this is just part of Jane Fonda's, like, I'm going to make movies that are important to me and that are important to causes that are important. Like, and also solidified her relationship with Lily Tomlin, who she's now co-starring with in
Grace and Frankie.
Yeah, and I will say quickly, I saw a drag version of this in San Francisco, where Pandora Box played Pandora Lee, and it was everything iconic, and there's a reason. Like, and if we were going to bring back, she said what? There's so many lines in this movie that are just amazing. When Lily Tomlin's like, I demand respect. When they call Mr. Hart a lying, egotistical,
oh shit! What is that?
That whole thing.
Judy, you've got to help me. That mob has gone crazy out there. They're trying to kill me.
Why would they want to do a nasty thing like that?
I don't know. I'm not such a bad guy.
You're a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot.
So I have a few faults.
It made a billion, which is hyperbole, but
it spawned a TV show, which, as a throwback to a previous episode,
Rita Moreno
played Lily Tomlin's character on the TV
Oh, really?
show.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my god.
And it also spawned a Broadway musical.
Yep. Which I saw, and by the way, one of the best Broadway experiences because it was
Allison Janney,
and
Megan
Hilty, and I can't remember the third, but the night I saw it, Allison Janney forgot her lines when they were at the hospital, it was just her and Megan Hilty making each other laugh for about 10 minutes before they finally got back on script, and it was hysterical, every second of it. Yes.
Wow. So you saw like a Broadway star.
Yep. I was like, CJ Craig, what is happening?
I think about that whenever I see a show all the time. Like, will I ever see that movie moment of like,
and the line is this? But what was great is they just kept playing off. They clearly, and they were just cracking each other up. Megan Hilty was playing the Dolly Parton role.
Yep.
She was playing the Lily Tomlin role.
Yeah, I mean, and all this is thanks to the production force that is Jane Fonda.
Yeah, totally true.
Blessings.
Well, and one thing about Jane is, when you watch her movies as an actress, so versatile. Truly, so versatile. My 5-star review is performance-based more than anything.
Okay.
And because she's made so many good movies, like you said. I'm going to choose Stanley and Iris, which is Martin Ritt's last movie, I believe. And her co-star...
And that was her last film before retirement.
Her last film before she took her hiatus for 15 years. It's her and Robert De Niro. She's first billed in it, which I love.
I saw this. I thought I didn't, but I did.
Yeah.
And it's where he teaches him how to read?
Yeah, she teaches him how to read.
Right.
And it's a classic Martin Ritt movie. If you guys know his movies, it's a very American everyday person movie.
That.
A lot like HUD, a lot like Norma Ray, a lot like Sounder, right? Like he made a lot of these kind of very this is the heart of America type of movies. Anyway, she's a factory worker. She meets this guy Stanley, who is he's like a laborer basically. He's illiterate. Yeah. He's taking care of.
He tries to save her from a mugger.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the beginning,
he's taking care of his immigrant father, who I think he's Italian and can't speak English and is getting old, and so he's working to try to take care of his father. They kind of start a romance. She's just getting over the death of her husband. She's housing her kind of defunct sister, played by Swoosie Kurtz.
Yes.
And her bum husband. And her kids. Martha Plimpton is her daughter.
Yes.
And she's great in it as well. And it's just a movie about how life's hard, and you gotta wake up every morning, and you gotta deal with shit.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a very, quote-unquote, small performance from Jane Fonda, but, not small at all. It's lovely. Yeah. It's very felt.
It's a sweet movie.
See, I like bright lights and a lot of people.
I see you're feeling pretty good today. You're wearing your pink sweater. That's what you wear when you feel good. And when you feel bad, you wear the gray one.
I only have 2 sweaters.
Am I right or wrong?
You're watching me.
You stand down.
I saw it at the right time for when I watched it, it touched me. I was like,
you were learning how to read.
Yeah, big. I'm still learning.
Exactly.
It was a big help. Yeah, up to tea. And then Robert De Niro is great in it, and that's a funny period of his career too.
Charming,
very charming, and they have a nice kind of little awkward chemistry.
They do have
and
chemistry,
it works, and it kind of makes me sad that she kind of after that decided to take a break. Yeah, because it felt like that was a new way she could have gone, maybe.
She referenced that was around the time that she wasn't feeling it anymore. And part of that was actually the town that they shot it in, there was a group that formed against her, a veterans group that was essentially we don't want her to film here. And during some of the nights off, what she did is she started meeting with widows and wives of vets to try and basically talk some sense into it. So there's all this backstory to that movie that what was going on off screen. But I think it painted her it
didn't do that well.
No, yeah.
I think that another thing you find when you look at her career is she stayed famous in the 80s, and, you know, obviously the workout videos and whatnot, but that was definitely the most successful thing. Like, she was making the movies, and she got nominated for The Morning After, which is a pretty interesting Sidney Lumet movie. But by and large, her 80s movies, post 9 to 5, didn't hit. Rollover was kind of a bust.
I watched Agnes of God, which is a movie that was panned critically, yet somehow garnered 2 Oscar nominations, both for everybody but her, for Meg Tilly and Anne Bancroft.
Interesting.
So, like, that's...
And that's kind of, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think she, maybe to that point, she didn't need money.
Right.
Maybe she thought people weren't going to see the movies.
Right.
So you think to yourself, hey, maybe, you know...
I'm fine.
Maybe I go to Atlanta Braves games.
I would be remiss if we didn't just very, very briefly... I mean, I think Coming Home and Clute are both really brilliant, and she deserves her awards for them. And they're both politically charged films. And she did a lot of work for playing Bree Daniels. She tells this great story in the book about how she actually met with a lot of sex workers and a lot of madams. And she talks about the one scene where she, like, goes in and just talks to the guy. And she asks one madam, she's like, is this, like, a common thing? And the madam said to her, oh, honey, one of my clients just likes to peep at me through a keyhole while I play with myself. Those are the best encounters. No one gets touched.
Amazing.
And,
that's so cool.
And I like that.
That's what I'm going to do later.
Yeah, exactly. I knew it was you, my people. That sounds weird.
What'd you pick, Gavin?
Well, so my pick is, funny enough that you mentioned the China Syndrome. The China Syndrome. I saw the China Syndrome this past year in January while on vacation in Miami. And initially, like, we were watching it super late in a hotel room at Turner Classic Movies, and I started to fall asleep, and then I couldn't fall asleep anymore because it's so tense. I've never seen a film.
Tense.
And essentially, she plays a reporter who they go into a nuclear facility. TV reporter. And they go into a nuclear facility. It's her and Michael Douglas, and they basically witness an accident that shouldn't happen. Basically, what could lead to a nuclear meltdown.
It was like it was a fluff piece that they were there just to, like, kind of, like, show off the facility.
It famously came out, the timing is unbelievable.
I was just going to say, it came out a week before 3 Mile Island, and no one thought this movie was going to be a hit, and then suddenly...
It's so prescient.
I mean, I don't know, in the history of time, has there been a better time? Like, the movie came out,
but that's what's amazing about Jane Fonda is she's always, or at least in the 70s, was always so conscious about, she picked the projects at the right time. This was, once again, a passion project. She wasn't going to star in it. She was just going to produce it. Richard Dreyfuss was going to play a documentary filmmaker. Richard Dreyfuss backed out at the last moment. They rewrote the role for a TV reporter and got her. She cast Michael Douglas. She thought their chemistry would be really good. Jack Lemmon gives an amazing performance.
Yeah.
He was nominated for an Academy Award for this. She was nominated for an Academy Award for this. But I don't know how he...
And Michael Douglas gives it's funny to watch now.
Yeah.
Because he gives a nice guy performance.
Yes.
And it's so endearing.
Yeah.
And he became this totally other actor.
Yeah.
And to watch in 79, it's just very fast. You know, he way more role his father would have maybe played early on in his career.
That's exactly it. It feels like, and it is interesting to watch both of them because I also think this is the most Henry Fonda-esque role that she ever took.
That's interesting.
She's the person who doesn't wants to do the right thing, but sort of has reservations about it. And that's really a lot of the roles her father took on was that sort of, young Mr. Lincoln, sort of like
young Mr. Lincoln's a great example.
Yeah, young Mr. Lincoln. Like I said, she wants to get it right, but she's not quite sure how to do it. But yeah, essentially, this tape that they have gets buried. She wants to air it, and they end up going. There ends up being a standoff at the nuclear facility because she ends up sort of guilting Jack Lemmon into realizing that what happened could have been a huge disaster.
Yeah. And they're slowly the movie's so great because it's showing you these kind of very alien looking things, and we don't know what the fuck's going on,
right?
But it looks like a lot of pressure and a lot of steam, and and the guy Jack Lemmon's character, he knows what's going on. He's like, fuck, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look right, and it's just over and over again. This doesn't look right. This doesn't look right. And she's kind of just in the periphery, being like, you need to say something. Something needs to happen.
Right. And in a way, it reflects that portion of her too, from when she was a child, that she's like, I can make this better. I can make this better.
Yeah.
And I think what my favorite thing is as much as she is method or inhabits a character, I think China Syndrome, you have the most synthesis of who Jane Fonda is as a person and at who she is as a character in this film.
And as a movie star.
Yeah, and a movie star. Exactly. And so other people get sort of chastised for that. You get people that are like, oh, they're always playing themselves. I think this is beyond that. I think this is her like it's just it's perfect. It's a perfect performance. And I don't want to spoil anything because this is a horror movie. It's a real life fucking horror movie.
Yeah,
it's so scary,
very tense.
But she has a moment at the end where she's basically just breaking down, and I think it's the highlight of her career.
We're on the air.
I met Jack Adele 2 days ago, and I'm convinced that what happened tonight was not the act of a drunk or a crazy man. Jack Adele was about to present evidence that he believed would show that this plant should be shut down. I'm sorry, I'm not very objective. Let's just hope it doesn't end here.
And that is right in the middle of her best string of like movies in terms of money and critical acclaim.
Yeah.
78, 79, 80, because you have, and 81 with On Golden Pond.
Yeah.
Because you have 9 to 5, China Syndrome, The Electric Horseman was a big hit. Not a very good movie.
No, but
a big
once
hit.
again, her and Robert Redford.
Sidney Pollack again.
Yeah.
I mean, but also, like, 79, she does China Syndrome, like, this tense drama, and then in 80, goes into 9 to 5, and it's, like, such a high comedy.
Yeah.
Like, bitch, when will your fave? Okay? 81, on Golden Pond with her dad having emotional, like, breakthroughs. Like, what?
Yeah.
So before we head into our fast forward, I do want to just recap because I know people get upset when we don't. What was everybody's 1-star reviews and everybody's 5-star reviews?
My 1-star review was Georgia Rule.
My 1-star review is Monster in Law.
And my 1-star review from 1961 was In the Cool Light of Day.
1963.
63, thank you.
My 5-star review is 9 to 5.
My 5-star review was Stanley and Iris.
And that's 89, and mine is 79's The China Syndrome.
Wait, so when was Stanley and Iris?
89.
89. Okay. I was going to say, we all kind of chose in the same realm.
And I'll just shout out, because it's for anybody who has Filmstruck who's listening.
Yeah.
Tu Va Bien is her very interesting movie she made with
Godard.
Godard, thank you. That she actually didn't really like. It isn't actually in that much of. And they famously made a little docu-photo analysis called...
Which is also on Filmstruck.
Called Letter to Jane.
Yeah.
Which it's Godard and... Was it Godin?
Yes,
Godin?
Yeah. It's Rodan and Godzilla.
That's right. Exactly. They co-directed Tu Va Bien, and then they co-directed Letter to Jane, where they basically kind of troll Jane Fonda and also try to defend her, but they didn't like her.
Right.
Because I think they kind of had a falling out making Tu Va Bien.
Because they kind of saw her as like an American passing as a French person.
And Tu Va Bien is not very good.
It's weird for you guys to hear this, but the French are a little stuck up. I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
What?
I know, shocking.
But it's a curio, and it's worth, it's the very not the very beginning, but her reaching her peak of political activism and making this crazy French movie with Godard that's about capitalism and what have you, and it's worth it.
Moving into our fast forward, as we mentioned, out now, as of 2 weeks ago, Book Club.
Go on, Book Club.
Wonderful, delicious films starring Diane Keaton and Mary Steenburgen and Candice Bergen. And
the movie was brought to you by Waze, Bumble, Book of the Beppo.
The Book of the Beppo's thing, like, because she leaves the rest. She leaves the restaurant. I mean, so much Bumble, but she leaves Book of the Beppo's at one point, and then there's a fucking catering truck behind her, and I was like, "You sons of bitches!"
Like honestly, all the money for this movie came to paying for these women. The rest of it is just like fake.
I hope Werner Herzog got a little money for that crazy joke.
Came and Forgotten Dreams joke. Right at the top.
The first 5 minutes of the movie. I laughed. I was in a movie in Pittsburgh with my dear wife Kelly and 10 other people who no one was under the age of 70.
Yeah.
And I died at the Cave of Forgotten Dreams joke, and everybody I think thought I was having a seizure because nobody was.
I went alone yesterday and I sat near the back, and I'm pretty sure there was a couple behind me, like fucking doing each other.
Right.
But it still had a great time. The
movie is like a gay man's fever dream.
Oh my God, I thought you guys were like rabbits.
We are. If rabbits took a ton of Benadryl and made a chastity pact.
Oh my God, we have to put a stop to this.
Oh, come on. I mean, if women our age were meant to have sex, God wouldn't do what he does to our bodies.
Oh, well, speak for yourself.
Well, that was not God. That was Dr. Nazarian.
The first time you see Jane Fonda after all the really terrible Photoshop, and that, by the way, whoever did the Photoshop,
horrible.
I was like, who was on graphics?
Yeah.
Who was on graphics?
I couldn't believe it.
The first time you see her, she's in a hotel room of a hotel that she owns, and there's a pilot there, and he's like, the thing I like about you is that you don't need me. And she's like, I don't need any man. And she is wearing skin-tight leather and zipping up
her
thigh-high leather boot. And I was just like, 80-year-olds can get.
80-year-olds.
80-year-old.
When will your fans?
Unbelievable.
She also is currently starring in Grace and Frankie.
Yes,
it's
on
been
Netflix.
on Netflix for
4 seasons. It's heading into 5 seasons.
I've watched them all.
He's watched them all.
Ask me anything.
And I will be honest, God bless you, because I watched 2 episodes when it first started, did not like it, decided to watch 3 more. I got to episode 5 and was so angry that they did like a fantasy like death episode that I was like, this is not for me.
I've been traveling a lot for work. I've watched all of them, and partly in preparation for this podcast, but also I just started watching them.
But also because I like cinema.
I like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda together. What's funny is Jane Fonda made a movie not too long ago, a Bruce Beresford movie called Peace, Love, and Misunderstanding, where she basically plays the Lily Tomlin role. She plays like an old hippie.
Right.
And it's so funny that then in Grace and Frankie she's playing, an uptight,
And she looks great in that movie. And also that movie's fine. It's on Netflix. It's
fine
a
is a perfect way to say it. Yeah.
It's very fine.
It's an interesting... there's stuff in it. I mean, Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in it.
Yeah.
It's a Woodstock movie. It's a movie shot in Woodstock. I know some of the people who made it.
Actually,
they're lovely people.
What I think is interesting is you're seeing the finer points of her career reflected in a duller shape now.
100%.
Because she plays the hippie version of herself in Peace, Love, and Misunderstanding. She plays the sort of on Golden Pond-esque version of herself in Our Souls at Night.
Totally.
And then she plays the sex kitten, the Barbarella, but full grown, full woman adult now. In Book Club.
But I like that she's still diversifying her role.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny that I think she's leaned a lot harder into her comedic.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't remember a lot of these movies that she's made in this kind of.
Well, this is where I leave you.
Our Souls at Night is probably the last dramatic thing. Everything else.
It's nice. It's
a
nice
lovely
film.
little movie.
Yeah.
Her and Robert Redford have a lovely chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
They've been in a lot of movies together.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about The Chase, which is kind of a weird curio from the 60s Arthur Penn.
We didn't really talk about Barefoot in the Park.
I didn't like Barefoot in the Park at all.
Oh, really?
That was almost...
We'll have to do a
that
whole
would
other
never have been my
episode about
5-star, but I like that movie a lot.
I like that movie. It wouldn't have been my 5-star, but I like that.
I like the other Sundays in New York I like better.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Sunday in New York is great.
Yeah. She's 80 years old. What is left for Miss Jane?
I actually have a couple
Book Club
things.
2, probably.
Hopefully.
Probably.
I would like to, and I know this is a lot to ask, and also she owes us nothing.
Well, Grace and Frankie season 5 is coming out.
Yeah, Grace and Frankie, guest starring RuPaul.
Thank God.
Yeah. It's a lot to ask for somebody that really doesn't owe us anything. I would love to see her get one last political, real political film.
Yeah.
Because she's sort of dancing around it, I feel like, with some of these projects. Yeah, I do think being a sexual woman in your 80s is a political act, but also, I don't know. I watch Coming Home, and I watch China Syndrome, and I watch Clute, and I wonder why we don't have movies that are like this today. And actually, I don't know if the MPA documentary that came out in the early 2000s talks about Coming Home, how Coming Home is a rated R movie in which a man goes down on a woman and it's very clear what's happening, and then similar scenes happen in the 90s in films, and those are rated X.
Yeah.
Well, Blue Valentine. That whole thing that happened.
So I don't know what she could do, but I would love to see her do something more politically active. Yeah.
I would say this to that point. So Jane Fonda in 5 Acts, the documentary about her, was picked up by HBO. I don't know if it was produced by HBO, but it is coming out on HBO later this year. I would bet you, if that's a well-received doc and it kind of gets that conversation, and she's been very present and, on things, Andy Cohen, Today Show. She, she's been around.
Yeah, the whole big Megyn Kelly dust-up, which, by the way, somebody used to work with Megyn Kelly. Fuck her.
Right. I will say, I think, so her, Dolly Parton, and Lily Tomlin came out on the Oscars together, and it was, after the Me Too movement stuff ascending, and so they all came out like the fucking goddesses they are.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, so there has been talk about there's wanting to do a 9 to 5 sequel, or
sequel / reboot,
something
where they're involved as the same characters, but it's not about them. They're
right.
sort of.
I could see that.
Right.
I mean,
and I imagine I would love to see just Jane being the wizened bitch who has paid her dues and knows her shit, and I mean, it feels like she's been fighting this fight for truth and women and, you know, like equality, and it's like, damn, her entire career has been this from sex pot to like...
Well, you want her to have one more gem to end on. That, you know, you want... I mean, not to... I mean... We hope we have Jane Fonda for another 80 years, but, you know, as her legacy is being defined and kind of... You know, we're looking back and there are documentaries being made about her and what have you, podcasts recorded about her. I mean...
She's still like the radical queen, like she like always has been. And
the one other thing I would like to add in, this shocked me going over her filmography. I want her to work with a female director.
Yeah, crazy this never happened.
Cannot believe that in all the films she's made, she's never once worked with a female.
I'll say this: Grace and Frankie, most of the episodes are directed by women.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be overlooked. I admit that, but like a feature film,
to your point,
like
it is shocking Dolly Parton has not guest starred on Grace and Frankie.
Oh yeah,
and it makes me a little upset, kind of. Like,
I'm also I hate that.
I would watch that episode.
As we're talking about it, I'm kind of like, how has that happened?
And they're good friends, and they're politically very different. Obviously, Dolly Parton's Southern, so like,
I mean, but
that's all I need to say about that.
I like get Catherine Bigelow on the line, get Ava DuVernay on the line, and I bet, like, God, I would love. Now that you mention it, I would love to see that. Ugh.
But I think she's got many years left of acting. I don't,
Yeah, I mean, because she works a lot.
Yeah,
like
I think it's important to her.
She works a lot.
Well,
for
now
any
I think
age.
Now she's back. I mean, I think the tentative Monster-in-Law Georgia rule. Maybe I'll do 2 and be done.
Yeah,
that's gone. Obviously, Grace and Frankie. I mean, whatever the quality is of it, it's a very popular show.
And also, I mean, she's even said she's like, I'm done with men. Like, she's like, I love sex, but like, I don't need to have sex.
She talks about that in her book. The going forward after her third act, it was about like being comfortable with herself.
Because she's not been married since Ted Turner, right? So it's been 15 years. I mean, more than that.
Yeah. In fact, for a while, she moved in with her daughter, and like, that's what she, it was. She wants to be her.
For a while, she went full method and did Monster-in-Law.
She did Monster-in-Law.
As a real life.
Exactly.
Real life.
Screaming and crying and taking too many pills.
Exactly.
As we all do.
Classic.
Classic Jane. But yeah, I guess that wraps up our talk of Jane Fonda. It's
we made it.
We made it. I love doing this. Thank you so much for recommending this.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
We'll get to where you can find us online, but why don't we give you a moment to plug your shit?
Oh, goodness, plug. Well, so as Gavin mentioned earlier, I work for Jordan Raupin, thefilmstage.com. Check it out. It's a pretty good movie site. And my Twitter handle is DJ Mecca. Yeah, Mecca like the city, MECCA, DJ Mecca. And
on the ones and twos?
And also I do DJ.
Okay.
Yeah. If you guys need me, booking at thefilmstage.com.
And you're actually going to have a podcast through them.
Oh, yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
I don't want to
No, I will. No, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. The Film Stage has a podcast, but we are offshooting with another podcast called The B-Side. Gavin was kind enough to guest on one of those. We're logging them now. The first one will most likely be a Tom Cruise episode ahead of Mission Impossible Fallout.
My goodness.
So keep your
Could
ears
you tell
to the
people the
grindstone.
premise of that?
Yeah, the B-Side, basically, the quick premise is we take we have our movie stars and we have the movies that made them stars, and then in between those movies are smaller movies or flop movies or not well-received movies that kind of get lost in the minutia of the stars' life. So we take these movies and we examine them, and we examine why did the stars make them? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they why are they?
I'm excited to hear some of the other episodes. So.
Yeah, so that's the next stage of that world, and
cool, awesome.
And for us, you can find us online at Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
On Facebook, we're just The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
And you can listen to us everywhere.
We're on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio app. We're
Victrolas.
Exactly. We'll be popping up in your parents' TVs, that's essentially where we're all at. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new subject.
And I will put up a poll.
Yes,
put up that poll.
Oh, put down that poll.
Okay. It's gonna be a hard poll for all their movies.
Guys, we need to stop talking about hard polls. It's like, thank you guys so much for listening.
You're so vain. I bet you think this song is about you.
Oh no, Jane. You're so vain. I bet you think this song is about you. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop. It'll soon be here. It'll be here better than before. Yesterday's gone. Yesterday's gone.
love.